Uh, okay, yeah. I was just asking you, Rijit, on what note should we finish? On hope, obviously.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another LinkedIn Live session between Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil, RSPO, and Center for Responsible Business. Before we start, a little brief on RSPO. It's a not-for-profit that unites stakeholders from 7 sectors of palm oil industry, including producers, processors, consumer good manufacturers, retailers, who actually develop and implement global standard for sustainable palm oil. The RSPO has developed a set of environmental and social criteria which companies must comply to in order to produce certified sustainable palm oil or CSPO. The company has over more than 4,000 members worldwide who represent all links along the palm oil supply chain. They are committed to produce, source, and use sustainable palm oil that is certified by the RSPO. Joining us from RSPO today is Mr. Kamal Prakash Seth, the country head Roundtable Sustainable Palm Oil. Kamal joined Roundtable Sustainable Palm Oil as the India representative in 2017. He's based in New Delhi, and he's responsible for the outreach and engagement activities to members and stakeholders in India, as well as formalizing the RSPO's presence in the important market, and also launching the Youth for India initiative. Facilitating this conversation from CRB is Mr. Rijit Sen Gupta, the CEO. I welcome both Rijit and Kamal to this conversation and request Rijit to take this discussion forward. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Bhavya, and welcome back, Kamal. Very good to see you this evening, afternoon here in India, and also to see that the two of us are wearing the same blue, the blue and white. So good. I decided to take the call just outside our apartment here in Jaipur, and you might hear in the background both the sound of a passing train at some time and also some birds, just to highlight that there is this peaceful coexistence that we've had always, and I think somewhere down the line over the last 50, 60 years, we've lost the plot of trying to peacefully coexist and create sustainable societies and industries and markets. Seems that all that knowledge and effort that mankind had put in sort of seem to have been backtracked somehow in the last few decades. COVID-19 is a great wake-up call for all of us, and so wanted to, at a personal level, at your own organizational level, ask you this question about your own thoughts on, how do you see us taking cue from COVID-19 and the lessons that it has hopefully taught us in trying to bring back the tenets of sustainable and inclusive business and markets and societies that has always been a part of our own existence on this planet, and more so in India because of our tradition and our culture teaches us that. So some of your thoughts, Kamal, and of course we will come to the more exciting stuff after this sort of little philosophical conversation of your session that you're planning to do at the conference. So, some of your thoughts, Kamal, and welcome again to the session.
Thank you so much, Bhavya, for the introduction, and thank you, Rijit, for setting the context. Very happy to be here once again for the second LinkedIn Live session on behalf of the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. So as you rightly said, I think there is a lot to learn based on some of the misgivings of the last 50, 60 years, because the world has gone through an economic boom in most parts of the world, while there is still inequality, and the climate crisis was still at its worst probably in 2019. And then we were hit by COVID-19 pandemic. The challenge now for the world is that there are millions of people unemployed. The income inequality was worse than ever before. And now we are hit by this pandemic. And it's not like the climate crisis is waiting for a business or waiting for human beings to just do better and be more responsible. Mother Nature has been calling for action and giving us sufficient time probably. And I think in 2020, I don't know, some people might have seen these reports which came out that after a 5-year review of the Sustainable Development Goals, if we go at the slow pace that we are, it will take approximately 2084, and most of us would be gone by then, probably. And the new generation, which is the generation after us, would be still around. And how irresponsible of us to pass them a planet to our own children, to our own grandchildren. So I think it's a very, it requires a very serious thinking for all of us who are in decision-making roles across for-profits and not-for-profit organizations. And really a soul searching needs to happen. And thank you to this pandemic. I mean, there is always a silver lining to every crisis, and we should not waste this crisis. It is an opportunity for us to build back better, or as I call it, build forward better. What can we build forward better for our generation and the next generation? And one of the things that I feel very passionate about and what RSPO works towards is how can we apply standards and systems to create deforestation-free supply chains. And as specific as it sounds, if you look at our consumption on a day-to-day basis, we consume a lot of agri products. So we consume palm, we consume soy, pulp and paper, rubber, timber. These are day-to-day items that you and I consume. And anyone listening to this would relate to the idea that all of them comes from agriculture. So if we can't ensure deforestation-free supply chains for our day-to-day commodities, which comes from agriculture, then we are heading for a disaster any which way. And as we already know, it's clear now that this pandemic is a result of the imbalance between biodiversity loss, or the biodiversity that was lost, as well as the human activity that happened. So there is no doubt about it that if we do business as usual and if we do not ensure deforestation-free supply chain, there is another pandemic on the way. So the question for us is, and as businesses especially, and for not-for-profits is, if we don't learn this lesson, are we prepared, are 7.8 billion people prepared for another pandemic in a few years from now? So I think those are my initial thoughts for this.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot, Kamal, for bringing sort of focus on the issue of deforestation and biodiversity loss, which I think something that all of us know. The rate at which we've decimated forests, the rate at which we have sort of deplored biodiversity is something which is well known. One thing which I think is clear now is that we perhaps, at least some of us, and perhaps the wider stakeholders, are beginning to make those linkages, are able to see those linkages between these grand challenges, as they were being called at one point of time. So, when you refer to something as a grand challenge, I feel personally that you lose that human touch. So everybody gets a little confused and also worried that what can an individual do, confronted with a grand challenge. But I think now there is a little bit more understanding emerging about the linkage between preserving resources, environmental resources, and human health. I mean, this whole discipline of science, planetary health, which highlights the linkage between environmental health and human and community health, is something that has come up in the last few years. So people are trying to and starting to make those linkages. So what? We have cleared about 50 million hectares of forest in the last about 20 years. Well, less than 20 years, 17, 18 years. So what? That keeps on happening. But now we are seeing that as a result of sort of clearing forests and clearing more forests for a particular reason, and we'll come to that, certain certain viruses or certain sort of diseases are becoming more prevalent than they were earlier. So we're starting to make those linkages, and now we are thinking on the other hand. So why are we losing forests? Why are we losing biodiversity? We have, and therefore the focus comes back to the way we consume, our own personal choices that we make as individual consumers, or as institutions which consume, or as communities that consume. There are those linkages which are getting created, and I feel personally that that's a good sign, that we are trying to we are starting to see those dots uh, sort of joining. Even if there is a hazy line, there is a line all the same. So yeah, so that probably also sort of is probably a good segue for us to get to have get back to you about the session that you're planning. At the conference next week, CRV's seventh annual conference, which brings us here. You're planning a session wherein you will try to highlight those that line. Try to demarcate and make the line between those dots clearer about our consumption habits, specifically on certain specific commodity, which is palm oil in your case, and what implication does it have on the forest, and more importantly, that we can actually do something about it, which we might not be aware, or maybe aware and not able to take the first step. So why don't you take us through that, through your plans about how you want to convey this to the people who will join the session, and citizens, individuals across the board. So over to you, Kamal.
Yes, indeed. So I think what RSPO has done for the last 16 years of its existence is to nail one issue, which is the issue of deforestation and exploitation linked to palm oil. And you can imagine, and many people know here, we are the largest importer of palm oil in the world. So in terms of purchasing power, we have 5.5 billion US dollars. That is the power of India's purchase of palm oil. And that brings to the question, at a packet of biscuit level, at a packet of chocolate level, like we were having a discussion a couple of weeks back with the Retailers Association of India members, I think it has to come down to a decision making that needs to happen at the highest corporate levels. And it cannot be passed on to the consumer, because the consumer out there trusts the brands to do the right things. The consumer doesn't want to be policing the brands all the time. And it has happened in the Western world. And we are already aware what happens when the consumer starts policing and getting on the streets to get brands to follow their commitments. In India, it is already beginning to happen. We have already seen that with our Youth for Sustainability campaign, as well as with the hashtag Know Your Palm campaign, that consumers in India are aware of the impact of their day-to-day consumption. So let me just take a quick example. So if a business, which is a FMCG business in India, which is one of the largest buyers of palm oil, let's say 500,000 metric tons per year, right? Now, the impact of 500,000 metric tons of unsustainable palm oil buying translates to more than 200 cricket grounds being lost, probably, in a very short period of time. And as Indians, I love cricket. So imagine the consequence of a popular biscuit or a chocolate brand or a snacks brand in India, which chooses to not care for this, which chooses to not have a sustainable sourcing policy, continues to buy unsustainable palm oil, means that we are losing hundreds of cricket grounds on a monthly basis. Now, as a consumer, do I know this? In most cases, Indian consumers or consumers don't know, which means, is the brand of product, let's say a biscuit or a chocolate, willing to spend 2 paisa more per biscuit, or wants to pass on that cost to the consumer? Now, you cannot pass on 2 paisa, because at a procurement level, and I'm trying to simplify it as much as I can for the businesses listening to this conversation, right? So obviously the consumer will pay either 11 rupees or 9 rupees. You can't expect the consumer to pay 10 rupees 2 paisa, for example. So at the procurement level, this cost would come out to be few crore rupees, for example. Now, where is that additional few crore rupees going to come from if you're a large palm oil buyer and you're a company? Now, that decision needs to happen at the board level, at the shareholders, at the AGM level, and at the top management level. What we have seen is that the middle management of companies have obviously struggled to get into this conversation for obvious reasons, right? Because these are big budgets we are talking about. But on the other hand, the good news is that These are also the Fortune 500 companies or some of the largest Indian FMCG companies, for whom spending a few crore rupees is obviously something, but it's not a make or a break deal. Meaning to say that if the first step is to make a sustainable sourcing policy, not just for palm, but for, let's say, multiple agri commodities, the next step then is to say, am I as a company willing to spend this extra budget on procuring sustainable palm oil? What studies are telling us, so Climate Advisors, which is very credible research organization, they did a study to prove the business case for buying sustainable palm oil. And what they came out and said is that they studied hundreds of companies from the period of 2012 to 19, and they compared RSPO members with non-RSPO members, and they said that the RSPO members outperformed the non-members by 24% on equity returns. So this is, I just wanted to break this myth for people out there who think that there is an additional cost of a few crore rupees to buy sustainable palm oil in this case. But then the consequence is that if you did so, your shareholders, your investors, your key stakeholders would appreciate that and reward you for it. Like the market rewards you for doing the right thing. And in this case, the study is telling us that the reward is of 24% higher equity returns for RSPO member companies compared to non-members.
And I want you to hold that thought there for a moment, for a quick sort of, discussion on that point that you raised, that, where is the business case? And from our, of course, our conversation together and with others, it is very evident that there are a bunch of investors globally who are looking at deploying capital for projects that have a very high ESG performance. So at the level of the investors, they're also looking for those initiatives wherein companies would come to them and say, hey, we are going to make this, take this journey, and we need we need you to invest with us. $16 trillion of capital is locked in with 30, the most top, the biggest top 30 businesses and investors in the world. And they are now who've committed to ESG funding, the Global Initiative on Sustainable Development. And they have now pushed it up to about 20 to 25 trillion, they're saying, by the end of this year. So it's not that it's a zero sum game. There is definitely some sort of, as you rightly said, there are incentives for those who want to take this journey and make that extra effort. What I think the issue is, Kamal, that often it is a matter of mindset. It's probably the fact that we don't want to go outside our comfort zone. And I think with the pandemic, what the pandemic is doing, what the COVID is telling us is that it's pushing us to break those shackles and those boundaries of the comfort zone that we all have built around us, either as civil society organizations, think tanks, international organizations, businesses, governments. So that is probably where we also need to start sort of investing and making those engagements so that people start to be more thoughtful in making those decisions based on evidence. And as you rightly said, if you're able to bring those evidence to them and consistently support them in taking those decisions moving forward, these are big decisions. They cannot be taken overnight. So it's a marathon. We have to have the stamina and the skill to run the marathon. We are not here for a sprint or a dash. So that probably is an area where we all need to do much more work than we've done before. Kamal, what do you think about that?
Yeah, and that's a well-made point, Richard. And I want to give another example for the viewers to understand the context. I just read some reports about why the palm oil consumption in India declined in the last few months. And I want to break the myth for everyone out there who thinks that it's a poor man's oil. It is not. So the reports are telling us, and these reports are published by Solid Extractor Association and other such bodies. The main reason for the decline of palm oil imported in India for the last 6 months is because the restaurants were shut. because you and I were not going outside and eating. We were ordering food at home using some of our mobile phone apps. But still, the bulk of the consumption of palm oil happens when you eat outside. So this is for all the people out there who think that, yeah, it's some kind of other commodity, someone else's issue. I know a lot of companies think like that. It's not my issue, it's someone else's issue. Or a consumer would think, oh, it's not my issue, some kind of other people are consuming this, and let's just pass the buck to some other people. The truth is that every time we order food, whether through a mobile phone application or by going outside and eating, which we have started doing again since the lockdown finished, chances are most that you're consuming food which is made for actual refined palm oil or from blended refined palm oil, which means palm oil blended with other edible oils. We just don't know that. And therefore, we think that when we eat samosa, it doesn't have palm oil in it. Every time we eat street food, it has it. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is our issue as a company, as an organization, as a not for profit, and most importantly, as a consumer. So, like you said, this decision, whether I spend additional $1 million to procure sustainable raw materials, that decision has to be taken at the highest level. And like what we have seen with some of our RSPO members, which made their decision, the likes of Procter and Gamble, PepsiCo, Hindustan Unilever, and the others, they went to their top management, they went to the board, and they said, "This is how we want to position our brand as a responsible brand." The challenge that we are seeing in India is that the competitors of these companies, they are not willing to take that step yet. So the market cannot transform. We can't move to a deforestation free supply chain. India cannot take that leadership unless everyone comes on board. And we call it like a pre-market collaboration, right? Like before you and I start competing in the market on our packet of biscuit and chocolate, let us agree on the fair principles of sustainable sourcing, which means no matter you're a Unilever or a competitor of Unilever, or you're a PepsiCo or PepsiCo's competitor, or you're L'Oreal or L'Oreal's competitor, let us all agree and take it to the highest management level and to the investors that we want to do the right thing, and our marketing department might choose to then educate the consumers about it. So that this is the kind of discussion we'll be having at the Sustainable Palm Oil Dialogue, which is happening on the 29th of October. And obviously we urge you to join this conversation, because 50% of the products we buy on a day-to-day basis have an ingredient of palm in it. So it's your business and my business. It's not someone else's business to take care of this issue.
No, great. Thanks, Kamal, for that. I mean, you highlighted really some of those important issues, and I'm glad that we are trying to break this down, and that's been, our part of our partnership between the Center for Responsible Business and RSPO is trying to break those issues down. It's a complex matter. It is, it's a supply chain which originates somewhere else. So, most of the palm oil that we consume comes from outside of India, and therefore uh, has implications on tropical forests somewhere else. But now with technology, the world is one. The boundaries are not really there. So as consumers, it will be our responsibility to sort of take care of the resources wherever they are, and be more careful in using them, both as businesses and as consumers. So based on the session, Kamal, what do you think? What are your expectations of the key takeaways? What will make you happy and satisfied with the conversation in terms of the key takeaways? And how would you plan to implement them in India as part of your and RSPO's work here?
Yes, so during the session, what we are going to have is a mix of stakeholders who have a stake in the game. So during the session, once you join it on 29th Sustainable Palm Oil Dialogue at the CRB conference, you will see that there is a leading FMCG representative, there's a leading refiner representative, leading grower representative, as well as government representatives from different sectors. And what our plan after the session is to have that consensus, to build this consensus that if India needs to play a role, a leading role in South Asia, Southeast Asia, for sustainable development goals, then we could start with palm and then take a multi-stakeholder delegation to the government of India. So one of the victories that we are expecting that would happen is that this consensus building, which takes time, we hope that will speed up with this session, in which case we are saying, Let us join hands as environmental NGO, as social NGO, as FMCG company, as a retailer, as a refiner, and let us all together go to the government of India, to the right ministry, whether it's the Ministry of Commerce or it's the Ministry of Agriculture, and say, we want to take a lead and we want your support in this. So we are not expecting you to do everything because you're in government. We are also willing to share that responsibility. So I think that would be one of the takeaways, that as a part of the consensus building process, we agree that let us take this issue to the government. And the reason that is important is because if this issue was to be left by the market forces to decide for themselves, we would have already lost thousands of cricket grounds, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, land, forest area equal to the size of thousands of cricket grounds. And we, as Indians, would then invite bad karma, as I put it. And we don't want to be a part of extinction of species, loss of thousands of hectares of forest. So if we don't want to be a part of that bad karma in our own lifetime, let us join hands and then make this case to the investors, make this case to the government, and then agree to share that responsibility. So that would be the takeaway that we're looking at for the session.
Sure. I mean, this is exactly what the not just the session, but the conference is meant to do. The idea is to see how we can all, and all the, this year the conference has shaped up really well. We were a little nervous initially whether, being a COVID year, what kind of response will we get to a sustainability conference. But contrary to our, sort of predicament, we have a fairly good, team of like-minded organizations, businesses, international organizations, even government. Some organs of the government of India, they're also part of this event, and it is really be our endeavor to sort of identify those pathways, as you rightly said. What are some of those pathways to a better recovery, or to a recovery which takes into consideration sustainability, inclusivity, equity as we move forward. And surely from this conversation that we are having, our idea would be to highlight those pathways and then share them with the senior decision makers in government, in business, key opinion leaders, so that there is some thinking that these are some pathways which are co-created or co-thought or co-developed by a wide group of partners and organizations who think that this is possible. So thank you very much, Kamal, for your time, and thanks again to you and to RSPO for engaging with the Sustainability Standards Conference of CRB. We are extremely happy and delighted to have you, in fact, as a lead partner for this conference, and you've been a lead partner earlier as well, RSPO has. So we're looking forward to the session specifically, and also to the conference. Before I turn it back over to Bhavya, would you like to say make some closing remarks?
Well, I think the reminder is to do much better now and be grateful to the pandemic, which has given us the opportunity to do this soul searching. And whether as decision maker of an NGO or a decision maker of a business, please let's build this consensus within our own stakeholder groups, whether it's the CEO's office, the COO's office, or the investor's office, or the government office. Let us try our best to make this case as soon as possible. The failure to do so is inviting for another pandemic. And I think I'll finish on that note.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Kamal, once again. And over to you, Bhavya.
Thank you, Rijit and Kamal, for sharing your thoughts and the idea about this session. Just to reiterate, the session that Kamal and Rijit were talking about is the Spot India session. It's scheduled to be held on the 29th of October from 11:45 to 1:15 India time at the 7th Annual Sustainability Conference of CRB, the India and Sustainability Standards. If you haven't registered, please do register, and we hope to connect with you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, CRB team.